Welcome to DABCC Radio,
where smart people listen.
Virtualization and Cloud Talk.
Featuring cutting-edge solutions from the hottest companies around the globe.
Broadcasting from the DABCC offices in sunny Sarasota, Florida.
Surrounded by computers, books, and Legos.
A Microsoft MVP, Citrix Charter CTP, VMware vExpert.
And your host, Douglas Brown.
And welcome to another episode of DABCC Radio. My name is Doug Brown, and I'm your host, and we have a great episode for you today. We have a gentleman that's been in this industry for a long time doing a lot of different things, but really focusing on this area of secure endpoints and the device itself. And one of the things I love about Citrix is, Citrix does what they do. VMware does what they do. Microsoft does what they do within the remoting solution. I think remoting is a better way to compute, but it takes you to the edge, and the edge is the receiver, is the RDP client, is the VMware Horizon client, right? And Jeff has been focused for the past 15 plus years on the actual endpoint, on the device that the user touches, and how to make that and optimize that and best for a Citrix style, VMware style, Microsoft style endpoint. So this guy is an expert and then some. And I'm very happy to really just throw out a bunch of questions at him and let him go crazy, explaining to us what all that truly means from a very technical and in business standpoint too. So with no further ado, we're going to have my interview with Jeff Kalberg. He works for IGEL. He's one of the evangelists for IGEL, and also just all around just brilliant guy. My job is global technology evangelist, but I'm more of a connector and building the community. This guy's the real deal. He's the real technical evangelist, and as technical as they come of anyone I know, and I know a lot of fine folks. I really like it. So I'm ahead of myself. I'm recording this after the fact, so I know what the interview is like, and it's a really good one. So I'll just shut up and we'll get straight to it. Here's my interview with the amazing Jeff Kalberg. Okay, Jeffrey, thank you so much for taking the time. Jeffrey, do you like that? Does anyone call you Jeffrey?
Jeffrey works. Jeffy works.
Is that like your mother? When your mother, the Europeans call me Douglas, and my mom sometimes calls me Douglas, but everyone else calls me Doug.
Well, my mom calls me Jefferson Scott sometimes. I don't know where she got that because she named me Jeffrey. And that's so I go by Jeffrey, Jeffy, Jeff. It just depends where you're. And of course, my mother, Jeffrey Scott. When I'm in trouble,
or Mr. Kolberg, as I like to call you. So,
Mr. Kalberg, right? People that seem to respect me, but that doesn't happen very often.
Well, they should. They should. So I'm very happy to have you back on the podcast. We did want a couple episodes with you. You were part of the Brian Madden episode, right? But for a long time, we tried to get you on the show just to talk about, you've been in the thin client world forever, right? As long as I think almost anyone has. So just sort of get your insights on that, what's going on in that space. Just a whole wide conversation there, not just thin clients, but just the, what I call the server-based computing space. So I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's get into this. So for those who don't know who you are, can you tell us who is Jeff Kalberg?
Yeah, well, my name is Jeff Kalberg, and for those that don't know who I am, I've been working with IGEL since IGEL products since January 2002, and known IGEL since mid 2001, and been in the thin client space going back to the system 32, 34 days, and when we used protocols like 5250 and to communicate with mid-range systems.
We still use those protocols.
We do, and they still work very well.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I don't think anybody really wants to use those, right? But, they're definitely very pervasive in the enterprise, right? Nothing, as I always like to say, I don't know if I like to say it, but as I always say, nothing ever dies in IT, right?
No, it just becomes a museum piece.
Yeah, or something, yeah.
You gave me that great book, which is Trip Down Memory Lane, looking at all the old technology from when I got started in the industry. But anyway, that's who I am. I've been around for a while, working in thin client space, and from the early days of Citrix and VMware and everybody in the industry, it seems.
When you say thin client device, what does that mean to you? What is a thin client device?
So I use that word.
Such a good
question.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I use the word thin client almost like. Because it really is an access device. So it's something that I have at my possession that I'm going to use to access my applications or my desktop. So a thin client, again, a thin client. We bantered back and forth about the whole history of the term thin client, right? Yeah. Where does that come from? It was originally the protocol. So whenever we say the term thin client, we're talking about something that's going to use this thin protocol, this very lightweight, highly efficient way of communicating display and user interaction with the back-end environment. So I use thin client. I'm talking about an access device. My smartphone, it could be is a thin client. It's a terminal device. Yeah. At times, if I have a full laptop, that thing runs as a terminal device, or as a thin client, if you will. So it's really a concept of the device that I hold and that I'm using.
Yeah. Jeff, if I would, let's say you walk into, you do a lot of customer calls, talking to the big wigs. We bring in our ringer, Jeff, and they say, okay, Jeff, this all sounds great, but why thin client? Why do I want this? Why we have Windows machines? Why shouldn't I just use this Windows box? You get that all the time, right?
Yeah, lots of reasons. Probably one of the biggest drivers of all is when I get to go back and put my accounting hat back on, right? So, one of the biggest reasons to do all this is cost savings. It's rather incredible. We talk about. And I see lots of data working with lots of customers over the years, but I take nominally, let's just talk about tickets, when people have PCs and stuff. And for the sake of argument, maybe they run 10,000, tickets a month, if they run PCs. And if they actually deploy thin clients and bring all of that application and operating system experience into the data center where they can manage it more efficiently and update things more efficiently and resolve problems more efficiently, and instead put a device in front of the end user, that basically is just a device. It doesn't really there become no tickets associated with the endpoint because all the tickets are being managed inside the data center. It becomes more efficient. People see tickets drop from 10,000 tickets a month down to 4,000 tickets a month. They see amazing reductions because of all the little crazy stuff that goes on at the endpoint. So just by moving to a server-based computing model, where you now have an operating system on the endpoint that you don't need to tweak or tend to all the time, because it's a read-only hardened operating system on that edge device, it changes a lot from a financial perspective. Going back, cost savings. Okay, but why? What else would I say to a large enterprise? Well, user productivity. I mean, I ask people, I said, what if you look around, and what would you say on average and a user becomes unproductive because they have something go wrong with their PC? Okay, maybe there's a hardware failure, or maybe they have a network issue, or maybe they've got some application on there. Maybe they clicked on something and they just gave all the company's money away to some Nigerian kind of operator, or whatever the case may be. I mean, these are people over the course of a year. I think your average employee is going to be down and unproductive 4 or 5 days because of workstation-related issues. That doesn't mean everybody's going to be down. Some people can be down more than others, okay? And, and we don't have any hard data about this, but, when we go around and we observe and we think about it, this is actually true. So, if you can get rid of that, people become more productive. People become happier because they can get to their applications, okay? If something isn't working at their desktop, they can go to the next desktop and work. So when we bring it all in the data center, that changes that dynamic as well. End users are happier. Applications run better. Okay, things are tended to better. I mean, I can now get my applications everywhere I go. I mean, the whole idea for an enterprise, and frankly, by the time we walk into a company to have this conversation, a lot of this has been thought through. Okay, they just need help justifying what they want to do, and we come in and help with that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, I mean, I get the question all the time. Well, why thin client? I already have a PC.
Oh, hey,
And
yeah.
it's like,
And to
well,
be clear, it's not about. It absolutely isn't about the cost of the endpoint. Okay, because that endpoint, whatever it is, whatever it's running, whether it costs $150 or it costs $500, the cost savings we're talking about has nothing to do with the capital cost of that endpoint. All these savings, all the savings and experience and everything have to do with everything being, just the way of changing that we operate. So when people look at the model, the fact that if they look at it and they say, well, they're paying all this extra licensing to Microsoft, or they're paying all this extra, they have all these extra costs for in the data center, and they have to deal with that endpoint. They have to deal with the endpoint. But the thought that this whole concept and where the money savings is when I go out and buy a device that's maybe $60, and hear a lot of stuff about the $30 pie or whatever, which, that of course is just a board, but at the same time, and it's a great little educational device, but that's not the cost savings. The cost savings is the management and the whole way we operate. So
that's a very good point. And I want to go down this path too, and I don't want to beat up on the pie, but I think it's important because I think that they are selling on cost, right? They are saying, look, we can give you a cheap endpoint, right? And whenever I hear the word cheap, I'm like, it scares me as an engineer, right? So can you expand upon that? What's the difference between, let's say, what IGEL is doing and the Raspberry Pi?
Yeah, so I agree. Let's not beat up on the Pi because it's a great educational device, and for what it is and what it's intended to be, I think it has a use case. Okay, but to me, we from an IGEL perspective, we don't really care. I mean, the focus shouldn't be on that endpoint. You have to manage that endpoint. You have to have an operating system that is flexible on that endpoint and can do a lot of different things. Okay, if I have a single use case, then and I don't need to manage it, then that Pi becomes very interesting. Or something, again, that's just because I brought it up. Okay, it could be a Chromebook. I love Apple. They got interesting management. I think it tends to be more expensive than people realize, but it doesn't provide all the flexibility and everything that somebody needs from a management perspective. So we don't recover. We still, if I use tickets as my indicator. Okay, how much time might I spend with that endpoint if it's running a relatively unmanaged operating system where the end user is taking care of it? Okay, it's like if everybody was running different versions of tablets and Android and iOS and things like this, it'd be difficult to manage that. So where IGEL comes in is we say, hey, we don't care much about the device, but if it's x86, we have a piece of software you can put on that called the IGEL OS that's tightly managed and does all the things that you need to do and provides the capabilities that people are looking for. And you get all the best of all these worlds. So, again, that endpoint is key. The idea is to have something out there that we are not going to spend a lot of time managing, okay, and yet we can respond to it when we need to and do it efficiently.
Okay, so you keep talking about, the management and quote unquote all the things you need to do. Now, that's very wide open, right? So what are all? I don't need all the things, right? We don't have 19 hours.
We can talk about obviously the obvious things: connecting to Citrix, connecting to VMware, connecting to Microsoft. We can talk about connecting to Amazon Workspaces, okay, or some of the other cloud-based solutions that are out there. Okay, and those are pretty straightforward. But what happens when you start to concern yourself about some of the higher level versions of network access control and everybody going to certificate-based access control today and needing to be able to work with a SCEP server or basically assign certificates to individual devices, however, whatever tools you might use, whether it's Cisco or Microsoft on the back end for that. Okay, what about unified communications? Okay, what about various pieces of VPN software, different VPN connections that you might need to make? What about the ability to participate? We talked about the applications on the desktop. There's a whole new area kind of popping up for streaming communications with companies like Kumu and stuff. How does that play? Okay, when we have a device out there that's limited in what it does. What about connecting to 5G networks? Okay, and being able to manipulate and control CR wireless and some of the other the tools that are used by by Verizon and Sprint and AT&T and T-Mobile. When you look at, so when I talk about all those things, these are all things that people need to do. Okay. What if you have some of the one-off, what I like to call boutique protocols, things like from companies like ThinLink or No Machine or some of these others, they come into play here also. So, and I think they bring an interesting dynamic. So when I talk about all the things that are unforeseen, printers, control of USB ports, control of our devices plugged in, contextual security, I mean, these are all the things.
Yeah. And you need a device, you need a workplace that brings all those together, right?
Yes.
You need a desktop that brings, that's what I call the modern desktop, back to that, discussion, right? It's something that brings all those together and in an easy to manage, affordable type of way, right? Cost,
Correct.
I like the way you said it too, sort of cost is sort of last in some ways, right? But yet once you can do this, then we look, okay, what's the most affordable way we can achieve our goal, right? And that's when, to me, cost comes in, right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I love when he agrees with me. When Jeff agrees with me, I know I'm right. A good place to be. So you mentioned a couple things. You mentioned unified communications. I want to dive down that because I know you've done a lot of work with Skype for Business and some other stuff, and that's one of those areas that's been somewhat tricky in our space for quite some time. Can you share with us some of your insights on unified communications?
Wow. Yeah, this is a moving target. Obviously, we have Skype for Business, and that's really initially. I mean, the whole idea behind unified communications, okay, is to bring together all of the methods that we communicate, whether it's email, it's web conferencing, it's phone calls, it's text, it's texting, it's instant messaging, all this under kind of one umbrella. Okay, so hence that's the unified communication piece. So obviously Microsoft Skype for Business, but now that seems to be will now become Microsoft Teams. Okay, we have Cisco with Jabber. Okay, which is really their unified communications product, but they've also had WebEx for years, and now they're bringing in WebEx Teams, which we talked about that before about the two companies using the word Teams. Well, I don't think either one of them could register Teams, so it's available for whoever wants to use it. But it seems that WebEx Teams is potentially the unified communication platform's future for Cisco. We have Avaya, okay, who continues to be there on the edges with their products. But big challenge with these around the web conferencing and the voice communications, okay, the phone calls, has been the ability to redirect this technology so that we don't get any hairpinning, okay, so that we can have a good experience, okay, when we work in a virtual environment. Okay, and this isn't necessarily a thin client concept, but it's a concept in how we approach things. So Citrix kind of led the charge with this whole concept of let's take Skype for Business, okay, and develop a method, okay, protocol, okay, that recognizes that I'm going to have a phone call or a web conference, and I redirect, much like they redirect multimedia, I redirect that communications experience directly over to Skype servers or to the servers that are going to handle the communications and get it out of the virtual environment, because we don't need our conversations going up to the from my endpoint up to the virtual environment, over to the other side of the network and down to the virtual environment to you. And that's just inefficient. It's better for you and I just to talk directly to each other. So that's the whole concept around working up and supporting unified communications in a virtual application, virtual desktop, thin client environment. So Citrix has kind of led the charge with Skype for Business. Okay, Cisco developed a technology called VXME for Virtual Experience Media Engine. They're rebranding that to JVDI, which is Jabber for virtual desktop infrastructure. And then we've got, of course, Microsoft kind of sitting there just receiving all whatever it is that people want to do. Avaya for years has provided a redirect kind of experience for communications as well. And it's an area that's changing because we're now moving to these Teams products. So the protocols are changing a little bit, but it's a tough area. This is one of the It used to be when we looked at virtual applications, the ability to play multimedia remotely, that was like the holy grail. We got to figure that. We figured out so much. All of this works so well. So unified communications is currently a big focus to be able to handle that well in virtual environments. But you know what? We're solving that. And I would venture to say over the next 5 years, it'll be near perfect. We won't ever talk about it again. It just works. It works today. So, but sometimes you got to kind of connect the dots pretty carefully.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of the stuff comes from the VMware, Citrix, Microsoft Server, right? Does the endpoint matter when you're talking in unified communication?
The endpoint does matter, okay, because the nature of the protocol requires a little bit more processing capability on the endpoint than a traditional, a lower end thin client device, if you will. So I've always said, if people want to do unified communications and do it efficiently, you need to go with a device. You have to have a quad core device running at about 2 gigahertz processor cycle. So yeah, it is important. Now, I say that, okay, but the next version of the real-time media engine from Citrix, okay, they're now for the first time, this is version 2.5 of the RTME, they're actually going to allow us to decode that protocol inside local media processors and get them out of the general processor and an endpoint. Of course, media processors are very efficient at decoding multimedia, and H.264 being one of those codecs. And since H.264 being open, everybody is leveraging that to improve the experience for the end user. Citrix has developed a method that's going to allow us to decode real-time media engine in those media processors. What that means is the Skype for Business on the Citrix side of things is actually going to be pretty efficient on a lower-end device, provided that lower-end device has a media processor in it, and we're able to leverage that.
What is a media processor?
What is a media processor? Good heavens. A media processor, remember, you go back to your old days, right? Remember the math coprocessor, right?
You bet.
Yeah, so kind of think about it the same way. It's a processor dedicated to decoding, multimedia kind of codecs. Okay, it's a GPU, if you will. Okay, specific to graphics and media. So, on the back-end server environment, we're focused on GPUs to do that encoding. Okay, which is crucial. Okay, to do that efficiently, and on the external side, we've got media processors to decode that.
Cool. So the other thing you mentioned earlier I want to dive into was security. Come on, I like the way you describe it. I spent a week doing a roadshow with you, and you were talking about security, and you said 2018 was a banner year for the hacker. I really like that.
Yeah, 2017 was
2017 was a banner year for the hacker. I like the way you
we had WannaCry. It was a terrible year.
Terrible year for us. A banner year for the hacker.
It was a banner year, right? And of course, it set everybody up going into 2018, where the top 4 line items on the IT budgets around the world, the top 4 line items were all security related, and it is a major focus. Everything everybody does today, is the security. I always talk about the security team is they're the king. They're the Knights of No. Remember the Knights of Ni? Yeah. But everything on the end user computing side, everybody that works with the thin clients, we're charged to giving application and a good application experience to my end users. And the people on the security side are saying they don't want you changing anything. We want to know what's going on at all times. Security is huge. Every conversation, every company I talk to, it's a topic of conversation. Everybody asks about it. Everybody's interested in it. It's hugely important. And we laugh because I know where you're going with this, because when I say it's like I say to people, I said, well, they want to know where IGEL stands when it comes to security, right? And of course, I laugh and I say, we got to remember, I work for a German company. IGEL's a German company. I'm working for a German company. And this is nothing to do with German engineering, but Germany doesn't think the United States knows how to keep track of their data and secure it. So I'm working for a company that thinks we're insecure. So if you want to know where we stand as IGEL on the security front, you understand we're German. Okay, the General Data Protection Regulation that we're all have to support and live by now, okay, has its roots in Germany. So when we produce an operating system or we produce a management system, okay, security is top of mind in everything we do because we're insanely focused on it, which is great. It works very, very well, and it's a good thing to have that approach. So that's why I hammer on it.
That's great. That's great. You also mentioned contextual security, and I think this is an area in security that's that's somewhat new, right? And I really like it, and I love talking about it because people are like, "Whoa, that's interesting." Can you maybe share a bit about what contextual security means?
The contextual security has to do with the idea of devices being accessible or usable in terms of the environment that they're in. Okay, so I always talk about maybe I have a device, okay, that I can pick it up and I can work at home or I can work in the office, okay, but if I go to a Starbucks and I want to work there, it doesn't work. Okay, so what happens is we're basically going to approach devices and the ability to access devices, based on the context of where that device is being used or who's using it. So, and from Ohio, we have this issue with this state up north that goes back to the Woody Hayes and Bachelor days, where literally people in Columbus, Ohio, are concerned that if a laptop were to cross the border to that state up north, that the laptop not work. How do we do this? How can we track this? Is it possible? It's a kind of a tongue-in-cheek little story, but it is this whole idea of contextual security is devices being locked down or not being usable if they're somewhere where they shouldn't be. And think about this: how many times you walk down, if you're on a plane, and how many times you look at the laptop in front of you, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it is really incredible that people actually are working and doing some of the things that, not that I read any of it, but but they're working on PowerPoints.
They're working on a PowerPoint of their next product launch, right? A public company.
Yeah.
It's just like, dude, what are you doing? Do you have any clue what you're doing? Why are you doing it? You have no, at least you should have one of those those screen things on that only they can see it if they're looking straight at it. Right. And, it's a public company, they're new, or, I haven't seen this, but, the next great drug for curing cancer, and they're going to announce it, and they're flying off to the session, and they're sharing it with the guy behind them, who happens to be a reporter for the New York Times. Right? It
might be, I hate to say this, it might be your only time to be able to buy a stock and not get caught for insider trading.
That's exactly right.
So, but in all seriousness, I don't know, there's no ill will here. I mean, it's just people just don't think about it. I guess they don't think about it.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. They don't think about it, and nor should they, right? Because they're just doing their job, and we're throwing at them, oh, you need to think about this, this, and this, and this. And they're like, that's not their job, right?
Right.
We should care about that, and that's the whole idea around contextual security. Yes, we'll take control of that, and we'll not tell them in a mean way, but we'll allow them access when it makes sense and when it doesn't make sense, right?
Right. And that's absolutely right. And so that's the whole concept, is that the device is going to be controllable. The whole series of policies around a device, what it can and can't do, and when it can do it. And that's where that comes from.
Jeff, I love this conversation. I have a couple more things I want to talk with you about. And these are things that you and I joke about, but at the same time, they're real, right? And so what does thin really mean?
Well, this goes back, So somewhere along the line, people started thinking about thin as being the physical device. I think I asked you once, where did the term thin client come from?
I got it, though, didn't I? I'm proud of myself.
You did.
You stumped me many times, but that one I got.
That was big. People don't think about it. They think it's something about the physical nature of the device that's on the endpoint, and that's like it has no moving parts. It's generally small. It's thinner than a PC, and granted, back in 2000 that was definitely true, but that isn't why we called them thin clients. We call them thin clients because they responded to they used a thin protocol.
The thin wire, baby.
The thin wire, exactly. The 5250.
Yep.
The just the ASCII characters.
Yep. Got it.
DT,
So here's the other
fonts.
one I like to ask you about, or which I actually learned, believe it or not, when I came to IGEL. I sort of fell for the marketing hype also, was zero client. What is a zero client?
Oh, I don't know why we call it zero clients. They should be called single client or one client, That's a good question. So where did the term zero client come from? I think there were two companies that kind of all of a sudden made it a thing. I remember Weiss, now Dell Weiss, they developed a product called the Zenith. The Zenith was unique. They had a little bit of a stub of the operating system on this device, but configuration and what it would connect to and things like this would come from a Citrix environment, and they dubbed this thing a zero client because it was being promoted as a device that didn't have any kind of local storage conceptually it didn't have any local storage in it, but nothing. It basically was a device that did nothing. But all it did is boot up and do Citrix, and that was it. And it needed to work in a Citrix environment. Well, VMware, goes out and approaches Teradici and buys onto their, licenses their PC over IP protocol from Teradici. Teradici is a processor manufacturer, makes this duty specific processor for running that runs PC over IP very efficiently. They dubbed that a zero client. So we have two companies making zero clients. Now, IGEL, me being from the IGEL side of things, people come up and say, well, where's your zero client? We don't have a zero client. Well, that's when we realized to us, it's like, well, this is really just a marketing term. I mean, what we're talking about here is we have a device that connects to Citrix. That's all it does. We have another device that connects to VMware Horizon. That's all it does. These are zero clients. And we looked at it and we said, well, these are appliances. I buy an appliance I buy a washer to wash my clothes, or refrigerator to keep my food cold, or freezer to freeze my beer, whatever, right? So this concept of an appliance is what we would say this we could ascribe to zero clients. So in the IGEL world, we developed this concept of an appliance mode, which basically we could take an IGEL device and turn it into a zero client by saying, I want to run this device as a VMware appliance, okay, or as a zero client. And we sold that product for a period of time, still have it available today, called the IGEL Zero client. But conceptually, it's just a marketing term. And that's really what zero client is. It has nothing to do with not having any local storage. I challenged the engineer, it had to be a sales guy. I hate to say it. Sorry, salespeople. But he comes up and he tried to tell me that they didn't have an operating system. And I said, I said, do you really want to go there?
I love it.
Your watch has an operating system. I mean, come on, seriously. So, we talked about that. Well, we don't have to update it. I said, no, let's not go there either, because you have any number of updates that you have to install on your device. Well, where's this update getting stored? Well, so there is storage on this device.
Otherwise, if you buy it in 2018, then we get Citrix receiver version whatever, and you have it 3 years, so you still have the Citrix receiver from 2018. Boy, that's not a very viable solution, right? And it's obviously not that case. So no, you're exactly correct.
Yeah. So it is. So it really became a marketing thing. It was something that was unique. It defined these things. They were called zero clients because I don't understand. They always did one thing, but only one thing. They all had storage. People tried to say these things don't have storage. They all had storage, and it wasn't always volatile storage. There was actually permanent storage on these devices to hold stubs of the operating system and some cache, okay, for the end users to be for the devices to be more efficient. So, but I think it's run its course. I mean, nobody asks me today about zero clients. There was a period for about 5 years, zero client, zero client, zero client. But today, no one talks about it anymore. Yeah. I think everybody's moved beyond it.
Well, I think the workplace is also changed, too, back to the discussion on what is a modern workplace, right? I think that's changed a bit. So, yeah. Well, that's such a good thing, and I was sort of fell for it. I thought it was the firmware. It was ran in the firmware, and that was it. And I fell for the marketing hype. I never dove into it, never thought about it. And I come to IGEL and I was like, oh, that makes total sense, and sort of almost felt silly in some ways. Although I feel silly from time to time, and I have no problems with that.
Well, the only thing you should feel silly about is if you ever thought 0 equaled 1, and that one I never figured out. So,
yeah, exactly. Jeff, I always like to, we've talked for a long time, I always like to end up my conversation with just sort of a discussion around the future, especially when I have the smart guys on the line. You've been here a long time, you've been doing this a long time, you come from the, financial background too, so, the cost and why we do things, how we pay for stuff is definitely changing with, OPEX to CAPEX and CAPEX to OPEX. And so that plays in. But what do you see as the future? What's coming down the line, both in our space, of course, and just in the world in general, right? In the tech world in general.
I think we're going to continue to see. We're going to continue to drive towards access to applications using all different kinds of technologies. And that's going to continue to evolve. I'm sure there are technologies today that we can't even imagine what we're going to have 10 years from now or 20 years from now. I don't think I'll be doing anything with this 20 years from now, or I'll be a user or consumer, I hope. But it is interesting. We talked before about the fact that the iPhone is 11 years old now. Insane. What were we doing 12 years ago with respect to this? There was a great article, Walter Williams, I don't know if you ever read anything, he wrote back in March, there's an article he wrote about, everything that we know. He was talking about everything we know is basically wrong 50 years from now. Half of everything we know is wrong 50 years from now. And who was alive 50 years ago would have had any idea about cell phones or Bluetooth or these airplanes that, hold 600 people and all these things that we have today. So how can we look at what we do today from a technology standpoint and accessing applications? How can we even envision what we're going to have in 20 years? We don't have any idea. I mean, we got clear screens coming out. Samsung's has shown some interesting technology, right, where the screens are completely clear when they're off and they're super thin. And now can you see stuff on your wall that is going to allow you to display applications on a wall? And if it's not there, it's just not there. We talked about autonomous driving, and when that gets figured out, if I need to get an application. Okay, or if I need to watch, if I need to remote an application, or if I need to interact with some kind of website somewhere, or if I need to receive a broadcast from our CEO, using some other technology from somebody like Kumu, for example. This is what we're going to have. This is how we're going to evolve. There'll be new devices, for sure. There'll always be a need to sit down at a desk and use a keyboard at some point. That's always going to be there. So we're always going to have that workspace that we sit down and work at. But we're also going to have this explosion of products and devices that we use to get to that workspace or certain applications. And that's really the future. We can't predict it. We don't know what it's going to look like. It's going to continue to evolve. I don't think anybody using a desktop today, could imagine. You remember back in the late 90s? This is going to be the year of the thin client. Do you remember those articles?
No, I don't. But
Gardner predicted it. Everybody's predicting this is going to be the year. This is going to be the year. It never really actually. Then they kept saying, "Well, it didn't really take off. It didn't really take off." It evolved.
It evolved. It wasn't. I don't ever. Whenever anybody says a year of, I think to myself, "Oh, just shut up." There is no such thing as a year of. I mean, I guess, like, even the iPhone, it wasn't. The people that, pre-ordered the iPhones were the crazy ones, right? The iPhone was a slow ramp also. Everything is a slow ramp, right, to mass adoption. There's no real year of. There's maybe a year that, things became viable or it was introduced or it was like, okay, people start to get it more than the crazy ones, right? But there's not a, like, everyone switches to it and the world changes at that point. I can't think of a lot of technology that happened, right? No. The internet took, a long time for people to really get it, right?
Right. Absolutely. And so it evolved, and we're going to continue to evolve. But access devices, and what we use, are going to continue to grow and be created and be adopted, and that's what I see. That's what I see in the future. I
So
don't
what-
know what they're going to be, but they're going to continue to evolve, and we'll continue to need to manage them.
And what about the future of IGEL? And I'm not talking about products, right? But does IGEL have a future? Does the thin client space have a future, right? Or are we just tied to Citrix and VMware and Microsoft, and if they die, we die?
So I think IGEL's future is extremely sunny. I mean, it is the way the IGEL product's been put together, the way our management system's been put together. I mean, it really is. It's an access device. It's we talked about everything's dubbed UD, and people don't necessarily know today that stood for Universal Desktop. And this is the idea 10 years ago, 12 years ago. I can't even remember when we first introduced the Universal Desktop, but the concept was to have a device, okay, that would be the center, a way to converge all these different applications, to work with all the different back-end different environments, if you will, or the methods for delivering applications to an endpoint, and support all of them. So when we were talking before about having a browser or needing a browser, maybe that's local. Maybe the media streaming is local. Maybe the unified communications is redirected to the local environment, but yet I'm still maybe connected to applications being hosted by Citrix, by VMware, and by Microsoft, and being connected to all of them simultaneously.
Yeah.
IGEL is set up for doing this, exactly, that exact mode of operation.
Yeah. I agree with you, Jeff. I think that there's no real better place to be in our space of IT than at, I'll say it, at IGEL, because we are so set up well for the future. In the sense of it's the modern. We've talked about the desktop is changing, the workplace is changing. We're computing from different types of devices or different types of applications, owners of applications. Some SaaS, some owned by us, right? And
Yep.
You need a device that can do that. But the device itself is just a piece of it. You need a managed infrastructure that is mature and was built for that in mind when it was built, right? Not retrofitted or, hey, we can change it because the world's changing. No. That's what I'm so impressed with IGEL is that the founders, so to speak, the early guys like you, Heiko, Mintia, all those guys, right? That understood that a long time ago and built toward that, right? And those are the things that's what really impresses me about this company. The people do too, of course, but the fact that it's just so thought out, and that's very German too, in a way, right? Is that they really thought it out. And,
They have. That's how I was used to. Well, and I'll digress, but one of the things that was frustrating and yet satisfying both was the fact that the approach is to analyze something like a dozen times before actually doing anything. It's the old carpenter, measure twice, cut once kind of thing. We're measuring 6 and 7 times and cutting once.
My girlfriend is German, and you ask her a question, it's silent. Well, if you ask her a question, you get a, that means no, let me think about it. If you ask the question, there's pure silence, she's thinking about it. And it's not just that she hasn't thought about it, she's thinking about it 3, 4, 5, 6 times. You're exactly right. Measure 6 times, cut once.
Right.
It's a whole different way of thinking. I respect it to no end.
Absolutely.
I really, truly do. Jeff, we can go on and on and on. I've really enjoyed chatting with you. We're going to have to do more of these. We're going to have to get some. I'd love to, we got to talk about what Luxottica is doing, because that's such a change of, a traditional way of thinking about what IGEL does or how to deploy applications and to create an endpoint. That's a discussion within itself. From our perspective, we had, had those guys on but there's so much you and I can talk about it. So I look forward to, but let's go ahead and call this one an episode and look forward to the next day. Sound good?
Doug, it sounds good. I really appreciate it, Doug. I love doing this with you, and look forward to when we do it again for sure. Hopefully people will find it interesting.
Yeah. And guys, listen, if you ever see an IGEL event and Jeff Kalberg's going to be there, please go, please attend it, because Jeff is just a wealth of fun and knowledge. When I say fun, I mean techie fun. Well, he's fun in general, but I mean techie fun. It's so much fun to talk with this guy. I did a road show with him, and it was trouble going to bed, right? Because we'd stand outside and just drink our beer and just finally it's like, man, we gotta wake up at 6 hours because we're talking about so much fun stuff. So please,
Yep.
Jeff is a hero of mine, and you guys will really like him. Great guy. So Jeff, on that note, thank you so much.
Likewise, Doug. Thank you. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too. Thank you. As I like to say, every now and then you have a lot of fun. And I hope you guys enjoyed that because I had a lot of fun. So what a great guy Jeff Kalberg is. And I hope, like I said, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I think he does a great job explaining IGEL, what we're trying to do. And more importantly, what that means to you, right? Because at the end of the day, you might think to yourself, oh, thin clients, I tried that a long time ago and whatever, right? I think, I hope you guys, if you got to this point, you listened to it, and I hope you enjoyed it. So what else do I say? But definitely check out IGEL.com. Check out what Jeff's doing. He's writing a lot of great blogs. So IGEL.com/blogs. And I'm sort of stunned. I love doing these things. So when I'm done, I'm always like, that was so much fun. And I have trouble talking. So anyway, of course, check out dabcc.com for the latest and greatest virtualization news and support. I hope you guys enjoy that too. And yeah, most importantly, tell a friend if you like it. This is how we grow. And of course, thank you all for listening to DABCC Radio.
DABCC.
Say it again, DABCC.
DABCC.
Can you say it again, DABCC?
DABCC.
How about DABCC?
DABCC.
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 DABCC.